the visibility of single mothers or single parents has become much more prevalent in Korean society, but also the issue of domestic adoptees, right? It's not just about us as international overseas adoptees, but also domestic adoptees, rights for domestic adoptees. So Bunyang, I'd like you to talk a little bit about how have some of the domestic adoptee maybe advocates had a relationship with international adoptees in regards to how the special adoption law is going ahead, and maybe some conflict along the way.
I think I was not as much part of the revisions in 11 you were, as Tammy were, but still I would say from my experience this time at least, and just listening to you guys, I think there are many more stakeholders, which I hope will create a broader consensus hopefully when it goes through. So in that you can say that we are in, that also includes Irvington, the lawyers, that's always been around, scholars, adoptees, also includes domestic adoptees who have, for whom really the past couple of years has changed a lot, where they are able to come out, where they are able to speak, where they are they're somewhat allowed, or you can say that they have taken the power to allow themselves to be politicized. There are adoptee parents, Korean domestic adoptive parents. And some of those who work with us have literally been kicked out of other forums with other domestic parents. So I think that is certainly a very important part of the changes that is going on right now. And still, as an overseas adoptee in Korea, there are limitations to how much we can do, and maybe how much we should do, I don't know. But the domestic adoptive parents are very, very vocal. They're also very, very divided. And so I think for some of them, it's very simple that their child's, that's a problematic term, but anyway, the child, if seeing the child maybe having difficulties, being aware that growing up adopted as opposed to not adopted is a different position, just being willing to dialogue, to listen, to learn, has I think also meant a lot to me to see that and to get to meet them. We learn from each other and support each other. I think still there is a small fraction of adoptive parents who might find it very intimidating that adoption is not simple. And kind of as Lawyer Huang mentioned, he thought too that adoption is wonderful, that it can be simplified. And then you scratch the surface and you have to realize it's so much more complicated for everybody. And I think the coalition we have now will hopefully produce a comprehensive law that could last well into the future.
Well, that's a great way to segue into the end. So, just a lot of things have been said and just a lot of stuff to process. And I've learned quite a bit myself so far today. But I want to end before we get to the Q&A, which we're going to have hopefully about 30 minutes for the question and answer session. We'll be taking questions from the Zoom audience first. But before we start that, what I would like to just end on is, if you could, each of you, what are your hopes for these revisions that are potentially coming up this year, 2022? What do you see as things we need to prioritize? So we'll just do this one by one. Who would like to go first? I'll unmute myself, and whoever wants to go first can unmute themselves.
So there are already some vision bills on the table, introduced to the National Assembly. And I think it's a very critical moment right now, because not all revisions are similar. It's all these different directions. For example, one revision bill deals with restoring the name of promoting adoption and giving adoption agencies more power in relation to the control of adoption process. It's obviously going backward. And some revision bills talks about real central authority and the ways to improve this process of birth family search. And so it's not just one-sided discussion. I mean, they have their strong points, and so it will be very difficult to have our revision. I mean, this Special Adoption Act improved in the direction that adoptees want. So we need more kind of advocacy and more discussion and more campaign on this in this. And obviously, I mean, we have certain points that we really focus on. We need real central authority. We need municipal governments to really deal with the issue of this decision making on the alternative childcare. And we need more strong and more broad support for the unwed mothers. And we have to limit the role of the adoption agencies to make this process public, not private processing. And we need to improve, really we need real improvement in the process of birth family search. Yeah.
Now it's working hard from our side. The people are putting the third bill, what you mentioned. But the bill itself is not enough reformation. There is especially the adoptees' right to know their origin. It's still very hard to break down the road, because actually originally when we revised the Special Adoption Law 2011, that year, first time ever, the privacy law is introduced. That's why privacy law is hugely hindered the implementation of Special Adoption Law. But we have still know the right way to find out how do we deal with privacy law and the Special Adoption Law about the record and identity issues. That is still huge issue. We have to kind of find out the right way. The privacy law is protecting the people's privacy, but whether the adoptive, the original family has full right, this level down and discussion is still necessary, I think. That is, but we are a little bit hurrying up to passing the bill. At least our side perspective is well protected, even though the oppositions are even reintroducing a promotion of adoption and so on. But I hope it could be more. I'm a little more romantic way expecting it is passing soon. Maybe it's a romantic way. I mean, I'm not realistic person, but yeah.
So, something that occurs to me that we did in the reprioritization that was also a gain from the first revision, maybe that's important, is that we actually have a place of an article that attends to the necessity of research. And so I think that's really important. So research in regards to our effort to move from deregulation, where that was the prominent model of adoption in the 1980s. And Andrew Kim, who was of ASK, was her thesis really looking at the historical view was really important, noting the shift from deregulation, where we saw kind of really for the first time where adoption agencies turned into profit businesses. And then what we're seeing through, I think we tried to, co-author this comprehensive reform many times. This reform bill, I think 2017, 19 was the last bill effort that I was really actively a part of that you guys are carrying forward, but also previously with Karma and Change, also involved, that I think that a few things still really stand. So I just want to re-articulate them, which is this movement towards this protection, to really see Korea have a protection system, right? And so rather than deregulation. So it's more than waiting days for relinquishment, but changing relinquishment to protecting vulnerable families and children. So this extending the family counseling period, going back to research, there's research that in the 1980s, only 5% of single mothers were keeping their children. By 2009, it was 64.5%, because the protections and socioeconomic measures were put into place, right? And so we need real research about that. The second is the expansion of claimants, the authorities that Wang Pyo-gyu mentioned, the support for finding family, and the right to these records, not just only for birth family search, but to reconcile other ongoing needs. When we did, I mentioned the 2008 research by goal, we did research 2015 and 2016 for the policy training of then Korean adoption services. And we found we had 500, we did a survey of 500 adoptees. I have some stats I just want to kind of go through because it's kind of important, because we did get another just single article amendment in the meantime, not comprehensive, but it's 8% of adoptees we can't verify that have finalizations. 1 in 5 adoptees that were surveyed have ongoing adoption paperwork needs, maybe to process for F4 visas or dual citizenship. We had 104 adoptees out of those 500 who required still adjustment of status. I mentioned that my adoption, I was adopted, but my adoption actually wasn't finalized till I was 15 years old, right? And so but there are still a number without. At that time, at that survey, there were 31 adoptees without citizenship. We also, in regards to some of those findings, we updated. Wang Pyo-gyu's been, really great about this, but, kind of going forward, this ongoing struggle to articulate legal rights handbooks for adoptees and the official records. So, there's been so much dominated scholarship, but it's really important to know all of the parties that were involved with this, because we have adoptees who were placed by 1952 Seoul Sanitarium, 800 adoptees by the Pro-SBUC. We have a number of adoptees going before even Tobias was able to track in Australia 2 years before through Australian records. All of those adoptees, if we don't have the centralized records, they don't count for services. They don't count for protection. And we're talking about we in this room get to be here. But, also part of our survey, there's an incredible crime, I think, in terms of the number of adoptees who have not been able to return to Korea for a visit yet, right? Who have not been able to organize here, on this land. And I think, there's ongoing need about that. So I would really like to see more done about expansion of records access and the scope of the records preserved, because frankly, we're facing things as adoptees. We know from our perspectives that as great as our allies are, they don't live the reality of that. And, when we're 65 or 85, do we some of us already know we've had adoptee spaces who've passed away. We don't know if they have the right to die here, right? We don't know about our aging rights here. Dual citizenship is not actually full and complete citizenship for adoptees who have Korean citizenship now. So all to say that I'd like to see a lot more. I think it's going to take a lot more. And it's going to take all different kinds of forms, and a full revision would be fantastic. And even I think what I want to say is we got Article 25 a couple of years ago, which was it states that support must be provided for those who've not obtained nationality in the adopted country to live in Korea. Even things like this are so, so important.
Good.